So I'll start this off by saying that I lived in Central Florida at the time of this incident. To be more specific, I lived in a town built by Disney that's referred to as Celebration. Imagine Disney World, but designed for residential living. Shops, restaurants, a well-dressed up town square. You get the idea. On top of all of this, the entire community had a chain of small lakes with miles of walking trails that loop around the majority of them. A good portion of these trails and lakes became very secluded at night. To add a bit more of context, the majority of the lakes also backed up to the woods that were stuffed to the brim with your classic Florida vegetation. It was so abundant that it would often completely engulf miles of the walking path. Anyways, I did not live there for a long period of time. I grew up in Georgia, but decided on a whim to move in with my aunt and uncle after graduating high school. What motivated me to do this was a passion for surfing, and at the time, this was my only option if I wanted to surf. My second favorite hobby at the time was bass fishing, which worked out well, because a chain of lakes in Celebration presented me with a great opportunity to do plenty of it. It took me about a month to make close connections, so for the first bit of my stay there, I spent a lot of time alone. I'm also naturally a night owl. Being up during the late hours of the night with nothing to do would often lead me to the ponds to get some late night fishing in. It was almost therapeutic for me. This was a pivotal time in my life, and I would often find myself drifting into deep thought while casting my lure into the sea of darkness. The activity that once filled me with joy now fills me with dread after the night of the incident. It started off as any other night at the pond. I had been there for maybe an hour, caught 2 or 3 nice-sized fish, and was completely relaxed. I was thinking about how I missed my family back home, when suddenly, a blood-curdling scream broke the stillness of the night. In an instant, I had gone from a state of bliss to completely petrified. The scream came from behind me in the woods. I immediately jolted around and prepared for whatever was about to happen next. A part of me wanted to run, but a part of me also thought that someone was in deep trouble and really needed help. The best way to describe the scream is that it sounded like someone was being killed. Looking back now, I really wish I would have ran at that moment. There was a 5 to 10 second pause after this scream, which caused every hair on my body to stand on end. The pause was almost more horrifying than the scream. Was this person just brutally killed? Again, a second scream broke out, except this one was much closer. Whoever this was, they were coming straight at me, filled with a mixture of fear and a desire to help. I decided to stand my ground and wait for this person to come out of the woods. Moments after the second scream, I could hear and even visibly see the violent vibration of vegetation closing in on me. She broke out of the woods and into clear view in an instant. And when I say she, I'm using the term lightly. The best way to describe the presence of this woman was feral. Her clothes were stained brown and badly torn. Her hair resembled a bird's nest, and even the way she moved threw up major red flags, if there weren't enough already. It felt as if I encountered a wild animal that was trying to run me off its territory. After a silent stare down that felt as if it lasted forever, she let out another blood-curdling scream, which caused me to throw whatever was in my hands out of reflex and run for my life. I had no idea if she followed me home. To be honest, I was way too terrified to look back and check. The image in my head of her sprinting after me shook me to my core. It was all I could think about as I ran. The front door was locked, and out of sheer panic, I probably attempted each key twice before finally having success. I stayed up all night, waited for the morning light to retrieve my stuff, and never went back to that area again. I honestly still wonder to this day if that event was paranormal or just a bad run-in with a drug-induced Floridian. If you look into the town's history, you can find that there's an infamous pond located a mile or so off the spot of my run-in. For whatever reason, they had an issue with cars driving straight into this pond at night, resulting in multiple drownings. Regardless of what it was, to the screaming woman in the woods, let's not meet again.
This all happened when I was about 16 years old. For some context, at the time we lived in a wealthy suburban area in the deep south. We also happened to live within a mile or so of one of the biggest lakes in the state. Most homes in this area were placed well off the shoreline and had a massive plot of land that led to a private dock, just how ours was. It was a warm summer night in the middle of June, and I had a few friends sleeping over. Video games and my father's beer fridge only kept us entertained for so long. Unsurprisingly, one of my friends suggested that we walk down to the lake and go for a swim. The rest of us hated the idea of going for a swim, but collectively agreed that it was a good idea to go hang out on my family's dock. Stepping out of the basement door and into the night, the full moon made it obvious that we didn't need a flashlight. My lot was practically a wide open field with about 100 yards of clearance from tree line to tree line, and you could see both ends of the lot on this night. As we made our way to the dock, we fell into deep conversation, and for whatever reason, we bypassed the dock and continued down the stretch of shoreline without even vocalizing the strange decision to do so. In the direction we were headed, there was a stretch of maybe 200 yards of shoreline that ended with a sharp bend. It was impossible to see ahead of this turn from where we were due to the increased elevation just off the shoreline. As we approached the bend, we continued on with our conversation about girls that we were into and other various aspects of our lives. Everything was going great that night until we made our way around the bend. Just on the other side, not even 40 feet away, parked on the sandy shoreline, was a boat that I had never seen before. This particular lot had been empty for years, and I have never seen any boats here before, so it immediately caught my attention. A few moments later, we spotted a man dragging something large out of the woods of the vacant lot and towards the boat. This, of course, threw up major red flags for all of us, and we froze with uncertainty of what to do in this situation. It's easy to sit back now and say we should have ran the moment we saw this man, but what can I say? Hindsight is a bitch. We froze up and ultimately decided to slowly back away to the other side of the bend in an attempt to hide ourselves. Of course, this didn't work. This man outpaced us, and before we knew it, he got close enough to be able to hear the sand and rocks we were stirring up with our light-footed steps. It was like you could see the oh shit moment he was experiencing just through his body language when he became aware of our presence. A few moments after noticing us, the man dropped the heavy object he was dragging and slowly turned to face our direction. We were still too scared and uncertain to flee at the moment. The herd mentality is a real thing, I guess. As we stood there now clumped together tightly facing this man, it was clear that he had no idea what to do about us. I was almost expecting him to try to play it off, like this isn't what it looks like, when one of my friends suddenly said run. The man reacted quicker to that than we did, and he managed to close a terrifying amount of distance before we were able to react. We ran for our lives that night, and if it weren't for my lot being as open and exposed as it was, we probably would have been caught. We left the basement lights on when we left, and you could see my house all the way from the shoreline that meets the end of our lot. This must have spooked the man because he backed off the moment he could see our property in the lit house. We made it back to my house safely and never spoke of what happened again. Also, I should add the fact that we were able to see what it was he was dragging when he dropped it to face us. It was a body that appeared to have been recently dug up from the ground. As it turned out, that lot had been purchased after years of vacancy. This guy must have killed the person and buried them at some point during this time frame, and panicked when he discovered that the lot had been purchased. That's my best guess.